Stop for a second and actually think about that number. 85 million human beings. That's more than the entire population of Germany today dead. In 6 years. Soldiers, children, entire families, entire cities, gone. The Second World War was not just the biggest military conflict in history. It was the single most destructive event that humanity has ever inflicted upon itself. And the most terrifying part? It didn't have to happen. At almost every single turn, there was a moment where it could have been stopped. Where one different decision, one leader with actual backbone, one institution that worked the way it was supposed to, could have prevented all of it. But none of that happened, and today I'm going to take you through the entire war, from the seeds planted after World War I, all the way to the atomic bombs that finally ended it. Every major turning point, every catastrophic mistake, every moment of genuine heroism. Buckle in. This is the full story. To understand why World War II happened, you need to understand something uncomfortable. It wasn't born from pure evil appearing out of nowhere. It was born from humiliation, from desperation, from a peace treaty so punishing that it guaranteed the next war before the ink was even dry. After Germany lost World War I in 1918, the victorious Allied powers sat down at Versailles to write the terms of peace. And what they produced was less a peace treaty and more a punishment document. Germany was forced to accept full responsibility for the war, the so-called War Guilt Clause. They were stripped of territory. Their military was gutted, and they were handed a reparations bill of £6.6 billion. Money they simply did not have, from a country already on its knees. Millions of Germans came home from the trenches to find poverty, starvation, and political chaos. The new Weimar Republic, Germany's fragile attempt at democracy, was tearing itself apart. Communist gangs and nationalist militias were literally fighting in the streets. By 1923, hyperinflation was so catastrophic that people were using wheelbarrows to carry cash to buy groceries. Life savings wiped out overnight. Into this wreckage walked Adolf Hitler, and the world would never be the same. Hitler didn't seize power. He was handed it by people who thought they were clever enough to use him and discard him when he was no longer useful. By 1932, his Nazi party had become the largest single party in Germany's parliament, not through a majority, but by being the loudest voice in a room full of desperate, frightened people. President Paul von Hindenburg, a WWII war hero who privately thought Hitler was an uneducated thug, appointed him chancellor in January 1933 anyway. The conservative elites around Hindenburg were convinced they could control him. They would use Hitler's popular appeal to stabilize the government, and then push him aside when convenient. They could not have been more wrong about anything in their entire lives. Within weeks, the Reichstag, Germany's parliament building, burned to the ground. To this day, historians debate exactly who set it. But what matters is what Hitler did with it. He immediately blamed communists, declared a national emergency, and demanded sweeping powers to protect Germany from its enemies. A frightened parliament handed him exactly what he asked for. From there, it was swift and total. Opposition parties banned. Free press crushed. The Gestapo, Hitler's secret police, built a network of informants that made ordinary Germans afraid to speak their own thoughts in their own homes. When Hindenburg died in 1934, Hitler simply abolished the office of president and declared himself Führer, the supreme, unchallenged leader of Germany. No election, no debate, no opposition, just silence. Here's what most people don't fully grasp about Hitler. His ambitions were not just European. They were global. He envisioned a world reorganized into 4 power zones: Germany dominating Europe, Japan controlling East Asia, Britain keeping its empire, America running the Western Hemisphere. At the center was Lebensraum, living space. Germany would expand east into Poland, Russia, Ukraine, seizing land and resources. The people already living there? In Hitler's ideology, they were subhuman, fit for slavery or elimination. And intertwined with everything was a ferocious, obsessive anti-Semitism. Hitler blamed Jewish people for Germany's defeat in WWII, for communism, for capitalism, for everything, simultaneously and contradictorily. This wasn't just rhetoric. It was a genuine belief system that would eventually produce the most systematic program of mass murder in history. The Holocaust was not a side effect of the war. For Hitler, it was one of its central purposes. As Hitler rebuilt Germany's military in open violation of the Versailles Treaty, the League of Nations watched. As he unveiled the Luftwaffe Air Force in 1935, banned by treaty, Britain and France protested. When he sent troops into the demilitarized Rhineland in 1936, they condemned it in the strongest possible terms. And then, they did absolutely nothing. The League of Nations was supposed to be the world's referee, the institution that would make sure 1914 could never happen again. But the United States had refused to join it. Without American backing, it had no real teeth, and Britain and France, both still haunted by the trenches of the last war, both facing massive domestic opposition to another conflict, kept choosing the comfortable option. That option had a name: appeasement. In 1938, Hitler demanded the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a German-speaking population. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain flew to Munich to negotiate personally with Hitler. He came home waving a signed agreement and declared he had achieved peace in our time. The crowd at the airport cheered. People wept with relief. 6 months later, Hitler took the rest of Czechoslovakia. The agreement was already meaningless. Chamberlain, to his credit, finally understood. But the damage was done. Hitler had learned the most important strategic lesson of the entire pre-war period: the democracies would not fight. That lesson would cost tens of millions of lives. While Europe sleepwalked toward catastrophe, the rest of the world was already burning. In Italy, Mussolini had been in power since 1922, building a fascist dictatorship and dreaming of a new Roman Empire. In 1935, he invaded Ethiopia using poison gas against civilians. The League condemned it, issued sanctions, then quietly dropped them. Mussolini took note. So did Hitler. In Asia, Japan had been expanding aggressively for years. Manchuria seized in 1931. The League condemned it. Japan walked out and kept Manchuria. In 1937, Japan invaded China. The fall of Nanking produced atrocities so horrific, 300,000 civilians massacred in 6 weeks, that even German diplomats on the ground sent home reports of disbelief. International outrage. No meaningful action. The world had accidentally taught every dictator the same lesson simultaneously: the international system will not stop you. Then, in August 1939, came the event that stunned even seasoned diplomats. Germany and the Soviet Union, supposed ideological arch-enemies, signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Non-Aggression Pact. Hidden in a secret protocol, they had agreed to divide Poland between them. The last obstacle was gone. September 1, 1939. Germany invades Poland. Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Tanks don't just punch holes in lines, they pour through and encircle entire armies from behind. Stukas dive bomb communication centers, airfields and railroads simultaneously so defenders can't coordinate. Infantry floods in to finish the chaos. Poland's brave forces are overwhelmed in days. Britain and France declare war. World War II has officially begun. For the next 8 months, almost nothing in the West. Both sides sat behind their defensive lines. People started calling it the phony war. It stopped being phony in April 1940. Denmark and Norway fell in weeks. Then Germany attacked France, not through the heavily fortified Maginot Line where France expected it, but through the Ardennes Forest, which military planners had deemed impassable for tanks. It wasn't. France, the nation that held Germany to a 4-year stalemate in the last war, fell in 6 weeks. Over 300,000 British and Allied soldiers trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk. What happened next is one of the war's great stories. Hundreds of civilian boats, fishing vessels, pleasure crafts, tugboats crossed the channel under fire and ferried those soldiers home. Not a victory. But it saved an army that would matter enormously later. By the summer of 1940, Britain stood completely alone against an enemy that had conquered virtually all of continental Europe in 90 days. Hitler expected Britain to negotiate. He actually admired the British Empire and wanted it intact in his new world order. But Britain had a new Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, and Churchill had absolutely no intention of negotiating. To conquer Britain, Germany needed to control the skies first. The Luftwaffe launched a massive sustained aerial campaign, the Battle of Britain. For months, the Royal Air Force, outnumbered and losing pilots faster than they could be replaced, fought back. They were aided by radar, a technology that gave Britain precious extra minutes of warning before each German wave. It was enough. Germany never achieved air superiority. The invasion was postponed, then quietly shelved. Churchill gave a shattered nation the words that would hold it together through the darkest years: "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender." June 22, 1941. Operation Barbarossa. Over 3 million German soldiers pour across the Soviet border, the largest land invasion in the history of warfare. Hitler wanted a quick victory. 6 weeks, he told his generals, destroy the Soviet army before winter. Early results seemed to confirm his confidence. Entire Soviet armies encircled, sometimes 1 million men at once. German forces advanced hundreds of miles in weeks. By autumn, Moscow's spires were visible through German field binoculars. Then, winter arrived. German soldiers issued summer uniforms because Hitler had promised victory before cold weather began freezing to death. Supply lines stretched thousands of miles. Soviet partisans constantly attacked them. Tanks seized up at -40 degrees, and the Soviet people, fighting on their own soil for their own survival, refused to break. The Battle of Stalingrad from August 1942 to February 1943 was perhaps the most savage confrontation of the entire war. Street by street, building by building, floor by floor. A German army of 300,000 men was encircled and slowly destroyed. Their surrender on February 2, 1943, was the first major German defeat of the war. The tide had turned. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor. Japan's surprise attack on the American naval base in Hawaii killed over 2,400 Americans and crippled the Pacific Fleet. Roosevelt stood before Congress the next morning, a date which will live in infamy. America declared war on Japan. 4 days later, Germany declared war on America. A decision so strategically baffling that historians still debate what Hitler was thinking. What he did was activate the most powerful industrial economy on Earth against him. American factories shifted to war production at a scale the world had never seen. Tanks, aircraft, warships, ammunition around the clock. By 1944, America was producing a new aircraft every 5 minutes. That sheer industrial weight, combined with Soviet manpower and British tenacity, created an alliance no Axis power could withstand. In the Pacific, the Battle of Midway in June 1942 was the turning point. American codebreakers had cracked Japanese communications and set a devastating ambush, sinking 4 Japanese aircraft carriers in a single day. Japan never recovered its naval dominance. While military campaigns dominated the headlines, the Nazi regime was simultaneously carrying out something history had never seen before: an industrialized, bureaucratic, deliberate program to exterminate an entire people. 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were murdered. methodically, transported by train from across occupied Europe to extermination camps, Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, killed in purpose-built gas chambers. Also murdered, hundreds of thousands of Romani people, disabled individuals, Soviet POWs, political dissidents. The Holocaust was not a wartime atrocity that spiraled out of control. It was planned, budgeted, staffed, administered with paperwork, rail schedules, and organizational charts. Understanding this is not optional. It is the moral center of what this war was ultimately about, and why the Allied victory was not just a military achievement, but a moral necessity. By 1943, the Allies were advancing everywhere. North Africa cleared. Sicily invaded. Mussolini was overthrown by his own government, though Germany rescued him in a daring glider raid and propped him up as a puppet ruler in northern Italy. Then came D-Day, June 6, 1944. Over 156,000 Allied troops crossing the English Channel in darkness, landing on 5 beaches in Normandy under withering German fire. The casualties on Omaha Beach alone were catastrophic, but they held the beaches, they pushed inland. Paris was liberated in August. Germany was now squeezed. Allied forces from the west, a massive Soviet offensive from the east, running out of men, running out of fuel, running out of time. Berlin fell in May 1945. Hitler shot himself in his bunker. Germany surrendered unconditionally. In the Pacific, Japan fought on. 2 atomic bombs, Hiroshima on August 6th, Nagasaki on August 9th, killed an estimated 110 to 210,000 people. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. The Second World War was over. 85 million lives. 6 years, every corner of the planet touched. So what does all of it mean? The Second World War was not inevitable. It was chosen, not by one person, not in one moment, but through thousands of small decisions made by leaders who prioritize short-term comfort over long-term courage. Every time aggression went unchallenged, it grew bolder. Every warning ignored cost more lives to deliver. The League of Nations, appeasement, the naive belief that dictators keep their word, all failed because people wanted peace so desperately they were willing to pretend threats weren't real. And from all that destruction came the world we live in today. The United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, NATO, the European Union, born directly from the determination that this must never happen again. The war didn't just redraw borders, it reshaped what humanity believes it owes every person alive. That legacy is worth understanding completely. Because the moment we forget how fragile peace actually is, we start making the same comfortable, short-sighted choices all over again. Hit subscribe now. We're going deep on every chapter of this war.